Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great event on tap, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will be able to access it on demand. Following today's webinar, we'll be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for either of our panelists, please don't wait, don't hesitate. Just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions, and we'll get to hopefully as many questions as we can near the end of today's presentation. And finally, at the end of today's webinar, we are going to be doing a drawing for 3 $50 Amazon gift cards. So stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our lucky 3 winners. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is Tips from the Experts: How to Up-Level Your Pipeline with Release Orchestration and Deployment Automation. Our speakers today are Tracy Ragan, who is CEO of DeployHub, and Jeff Keyes, who is Director of Product Marketing at Plutora. Welcome to you both. Good to hear from you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Good morning.
Well, I'm going to put myself on mute, let you guys get to it.
I guess that turns the time over to me. I love this topic. It's right in line with where folks are going. If you find yourself in the middle of a digital transformation and you're trying to modernize, these are some common messages you've been hearing, and probably are some aspects of it are you're wrestling with. So I'm going to just dive in. One of the most common things I keep hearing and I'm a solid believer in is a transformation of not only how we build and develop software, but the fact that we need to organize our teams around becoming more agile in DevOps. The only way to do that is to have integrated product teams where these teams are completely self-contained, self-led, self-directed. Product managers are working closely with customers, and being autonomous can get crap done. The idea is that then these small teams can create smaller units of work and deliver more frequently. Well, that requires a different delivery model, and the goal of that delivery model is that these small delivery teams are running different sprints and, in essence, releasing at the end of each sprint everything that's needed as part of that release, including security, including the scanning, the hardening, whatever performance, user experience, and other kinds of validation are all included in every single sprint, such that when a release happens and things go to production, life's wonderful. We've met the goal. Thus, the main DevOps metrics actually increase. Deployment frequency increases. Our mean time to repair reduces because we can get bug fixes out faster. Everything is automated, and we've got a complete pipeline beginning to end. Well, that's nice. And what you're wondering is, well, why are we here then? Because if that's the goal, just get there. As a prospect told me, and I've said this a number of times, it was really funny when I heard, we've been doing DevOps for 18 months, have yet to release anything. It's a big challenge because it is hard, and it's hard for a number of reasons, and some of those aspects we're going to get into. The interesting part of the J curve of transformation that Dora talks about is that in the journey of digital transformation, that as the process of implementing more automation helps the low performers progress to medium performers, but what happens is that automation all of a sudden exposes all sorts of technical debt and challenges, including cultural and practices that make it really hard to proceed. So great, you implemented CI, great, you implemented unit tests, you started doing more automated tests, service virtualization, and then you run into the wall. And in fact, their transformation, now they're doing worse than they were before because now they've got multiple methods of application delivery going on that they somehow have to coordinate. When you imagine that the reality of a real software delivery pipeline, what it looks like automated through, this actually is a drawing that we did with a prospect and now a customer as we were talking through the process. And what's interesting is up to the items in green, it was completely automated and had a great time getting it there. There's a lot of parts that went into the different non-production environments as part of that preparing through, but we're still wrestling with how do I transition these things into the world of operations and bring really the reality of DevOps where I combine operations into my development world. It's hard, and it's hard for a reason. And Tracy is going to talk about a bit more of what's happening as well, making this more complicated.
So if you think about the previous screen and the flow chart that Jeff put up there, when we start doing, we start moving away from monolithic processes to microservices, you have that same exact flow chart, but you have it for many more pieces, because now you're going to think functions and not an entire big binary. So the binary is broken into the many tiny pieces, but those many tiny pieces still have to go through the process. So, I often think of analogies. This is like a Lego set. So right now, the way we manage our production environments is it's like we go out and buy the Lego kit for the dragon, and we assemble it, and it's really cool, and we're not going to take it apart. We're going to set it up on the shelf, and we're going to check it out for a while. And it's going to sit up there probably for quite a long time before we make a change to it. That process is going away. And the reason for the need for these kinds of tools is because of that. We have to have a way that we can start adapting to changes much more frequently. And that flow chart that we showed may need to be either condensed or highly automated, with lots of communication points, lots of exits for sending out messages to other people, because we no longer have our dragon sitting on the shelf. It is a transformer instead, and it's changing on a high frequency basis. Next screen.
Yeah.
So when you think about what that looks like, right now even though we talk about doing agile, we talk about doing continuous integration, many of us talk about doing continuous delivery, we're still doing things that are pretty separated in silos. We're separated by walls. When we start moving to a low-code environment where we're trying to encourage reuse, what we have instead is a Kubernetes environment where you're reusing different functions. And you want to be able to share those functions across teams, and you need to be able to track their dependencies. So moving from a monolithic to a high-frequency agile release can be challenging in today's world, and it will be even more challenging in the microservices world. And what I explain to people is that the sooner they start thinking about their production and testing environments, in particular production, as more of a transformer than a Lego set, the faster you're going to get to microservices, because there's a cultural change that has to happen. We have to stop relying on Excel spreadsheets and one-off scripts and manually typed in emails. Everything has to be automated. And we have to start building out better configurations to track how these pieces and parts are put together. And that's what these tools are all about. Next screen. So if you think about why are we doing this? If it's more complicated, why are we going down this road? Changes in the way we're developing software are being driven by really two things. The big thing is AI applications and machine learning applications. These types of software need the high availability and the redundancy. Think self-driving cars. We don't want an outage when we're driving down the freeway and the car's driving itself and it loses connection for some reason. And we don't even want to imagine what that's going to happen, what that's going to cost. So AI and machine learning are types of applications that have to be at 100%. We've always wanted 100% fault tolerance, but we've never been able to get there. Well, Kubernetes gets us there because of the way it spins itself up. Secondly, we're going to be continuously updating our environments. Like I said, it's a transformer. It's not a Lego set. So these old practices, we have to replace them in order to get to where we need to be for AI and machine learning. And then automation and tracking is a requirement. See, in the past, we've had the luxury of time to pick up the phone and talk to folks or do things in a more manual basis, even if we have a CI/CD process that runs some basic scripts. we still have to automate more. More has to be automated in order to go fast. And like I keep saying, the scripts and Excel spreadsheets that people are using today, those are a luxury because you have the luxury of time to keep them updated. And what you need now is the ability to track if you made a change, when it was checked in, and understand how long it took to get through the pipeline and when you were able to deliver that critical new feature to your end users. So it's all about getting new innovation out faster, having applications that are have high availability and are fault tolerant, and being able to move pieces and parts through the value stream as quickly as possible.
That's right. So what's really kind of funny about that, you're thinking, okay, so you've just talked about we've got to end up in this 100% automated world, and I need to have my full delivery graph. Things are getting smaller. There's more basically releases that are happening. So I go more microservices. There's much more dependence that things just have to happen that way. But what about me? I'm not 100% automated. I'm stuck in this world of trying to deal with a bunch of different things. I do have some automation in place, and I need to mix that with my legacy waterfall teams, with my agile and DevOps processes, and I still have to coordinate those releases because my system of record kind of applications are going together and releasing with my customer facing applications. There's dependencies between them. I don't have standardized processor for each of those. I've got to nail that down, and I have heavy governance requirements. Is this you? Well, listen on, because this is where this gets interesting. Governance, I tell you, it is used as the heavy bat to knock people down and say, well, you can't do that. And I think about it from the management point of view. When if I'm a CIO, what's the next cool thing that I went through Lean, I went through Agile, I went through I think of all these different things. First it was sprints, and then I'm going to do Kanban, and now all of it just is another excuse of saying why the development teams can't produce faster, because it's a new methodology. And as soon as we implement this latest tool or this latest whatever, they've heard it all. And when you've been doing this for as long as many of the enterprises have, where they've been around for centuries and trying to deal with the governance requirements, governance and compliance requirements, it's quite significant. That's why these are in place, to make sure that the right things happen. This is the wall that somehow we have to find a way through. And the simplistic view of some folks is to say, well, just automate that. Well, sure, that's how to be a millionaire. Just get $1 million and then I'll show you how to be a millionaire. It's more complicated than that. What it ends up showing is that most folks end up stalling here, where you end up creating a set of agile sprints, and you build up CI/CD with automated tests and automated scanning, and you're working more and more security in, but then you get stuck. And you get stuck where you have to go through regression. You've got all these other governance and hardening and security and performance and your UAT. And in essence, the focus of the development team doesn't move on to the next iteration. They stay on that last release trying to fix things, if you will, and check all the boxes, which really slows things down. So how do we move forward? How do we get going? How do we take the next step? What is the process of getting truly to this world of continuous deployment? And I'm sure you're hearing some of the hints of it, but let's talk about that. What does this actually mean? Where does it actually mean to get into release orchestration, release automation? Because these are different things. If you look at managing your value streams, the combination of your waterfall legacy and your faster moving pipelines, you've got to have a system that sits above the delivery model and above the delivery tools that can combine them together to create a unified set of releases, if you will, that are going forward. They need to be templatized. They need to be standardized, where all the processes and steps, whether they're manual or automated, are included. And then you need to automate as much as you possibly can through packaging and publishing publishing and versioning, and using a system that is purpose-built for that kind of automation. Just as much as you need continuous integration, you need a CI server, and you need specific tools for build, you need tools that will also do continuous deployment and help version and push so that you don't have to go write that every time. I've been saying this for a long time. People have been using Jenkins in unnatural ways, doing unnatural acts, trying to accomplish these things of manual steps and approvals and deployments and mapping servers and different environments. Don't do that. This is the new world that you need to move into. Tracy, any thoughts on this one?
No, I think you got it covered.
Okay, so we're going to talk about a couple of pieces. What is release orchestration? And what is release automation? Release orchestration is simply that. It's a workflow that is managing all the tasks included in a process. Those tasks might be automated, they might be manual. The point is that it will organize and communicate and ensure those tasks happen in a certain sequence with a certain level of governance, with auditability, with the ability to go back and trace who did what, with notifications and the communication out to people. And it really is the key to helping bridge the gap between the legacy and the new world. Release automation are the tools that do the packaging, the versioning, and ultimately the deployment, the moving of the artifacts and the bits into the physical infrastructures or the virtualized infrastructures, and tracking where they're at and ensuring that the right versions are where, and doing it in a way that it doesn't have to be scripted. You're going to do it in a model way. So you can just describe, hey, these bits need to go to these places, and it just happens. And when new versions come out, they just follow the same process. And hand in hand form a complete solution, because now you can use the release orchestration to manage all the governance, manage all the process, and make sure the right things happen. And when it's time to push the button, in essence, to release, it just happens, and it happens as a snap of your fingers, and it just goes forward. So release orchestration, taking that a little bit further. If you have to think of every delivery as being templatized, there's some cool aspects of this. That one, you want to break up that delivery into a series of phases and gates so that you can take and coordinate across product teams, where each team has a separate set of delivery, but yet you can gate their delivery based upon the governance and requirements, governance and compliance requirements, of security or UAT or what have you, as it moves forward. As soon as all of the quality and whatever gates are passing, then it moves forward. All those gates could be automated. All the gates could be manual. It doesn't matter. The point is that it integrates into your CI processes and finds a way to incorporate the governance and the rest of the manual processes. The point is, if you're wrestling with how to get through with your governance teams, the point is use release orchestration and bring them in. This is how you're going to create an integrated product team, is because now everyone has a part. Those people that are, the architecture board or what have you, can be a part of this process. As the test teams, if you're, for those manual test teams that are there, can be part of each of the processes, the stages that are going through integration test or UAT and so forth. And that's how you bring them together. So ultimately, this value stream management on top of this allows you to combine all these things together, not just release orchestration, but incorporating the environment management as part of the solution, so that those pre-production environments that aren't that aren't Kubernetes and microservices, you have a way to manage them, that you can incorporate more complex deployment management if you need to incorporate that in conjunction with release automation. And ultimately, with value stream management, you'll get analytics across the entire delivery pipeline. You can get everything you need from ideation into production in terms of the velocity, the cycle time, process time, and be able to focus in on waste and target those areas that are needing your attention. And most specifically, here's the cool part, once you have everything into a release orchestration world, and once you've got all your phases set out for delivery, you can now really pinpoint the fact that we spend 2 weeks waiting for a change advisory board approval. Is there any way to pull that in? You'll have those metrics. And then you can do more because you can start to templatize. So when you look at this, it gives you everything you need in order to put the pieces together, and kind of takes you to the next step. So let's look at release automation.
So what Jeff's really been talking about is how do you blow up your water scrum fall approach, right? Because that's pretty much where most companies are.
Exactly.
And there's some cultural things that cause that, but there's also tool-based things that cause that. So what I've seen is that many of the development teams have embraced Agile, they've embraced CI, and now they're embracing continuous delivery, which is, the goal of continuous delivery is to be able to push things across the process as quickly as possible. And the reason why we still have this water scrum fall approach is because we still have the wall to production, and the wall to production is really all about deployments. To be honest, the operations side of the house, they don't really care about the conversation until you want to pull the dragon off the shelf and put a new part on it. That's when they want to get involved, and they're adverse to doing that on a regular basis. They like to see their dragon in one whole piece. They don't want to take it apart and put it back together. So release automation tools perform what I like to call continuous deployment, not continuous delivery, continuous deployment, meaning that you are piercing that wall through production and you're going and you're updating on a regular basis, on a high frequency basis. This is critical for microservices. You're not going to have microservices in a water scrum fall approach. So one of the key parts of continuous deployment is collaboration, being able to share pieces and parts together. It's the top of it's the book of the Lego kit you're working on. You really have to understand what you're building. And in microservices, you start losing control of what the monolithic equivalent looks like because you have a lot of pieces and parts that are moving together. So cataloging and having a place to catalog and publish shared components become important. And we can talk about this in a microservices world where it's critical, or in a monolithic world where it should be essential. So if you think about a monolithic, you still have pieces and parts. You have the full stack. You have the binary that you're moving, a jar file or a WAR file. You have the database updates that don't normally get included in your CI/CD workflow. You call them, and that's a step on the outside of your workflow process. And if you're doing database updates inside, congratulations to you. It's not something many people think about. And then you have the underlying pieces, the infrastructure, that really is making up part of your application. The version of the Java runtime you're using is something as simple as that, or a version of some third-party component that more than one team is using. Or you might even have some reuse in your organization and have a central logging routine. Those pieces and parts need a place to be shared and cataloged. In microservice management, you're going to start hearing a lot about domain-driven design and being able to write microservices and catalog them and share them in proper organizational structures that represent their functional area. Once you've got this ability to really see how all the parts move, then you can begin pretty much mapping your application or building out your application, or what's often called packaging. And that's really just defining your application based on its binaries and its database updates, its environment variables, and its infrastructure. This is generally done with with somebody really as unsung hero. I used to be the person who wrote the build and release scripts. They know all the pieces and parts. They understood how the build looked, so they're best to build out a release script. And then you might version it. Now, in the kind of the GitOps fashion, you would version your release script. But there's pieces and parts in that. There's core data inside that script that gets missed out. And it's not unusual for developers to write the script, the release script. Testers will re-execute it, but production has their own stuff. And production looks different, and so they'll go and write a script on their own. There is often problems between this collaboration between what developers have and what production delivers. I've seen where developers are literally using Jenkins and they have a release script that they're using, but production wants it all put in a chef or a Puppet script. So there's a difference. And when that information has to be communicated manually, this is not agile. because if a script has to be tweaked in any way, then production has to tweak their version of it. It's just not automated. Even though there's a script that does it and you kick it off, it truly is not automated. You have people who are hand-holding that process. And then you miss the core pieces of versioning. So when we talk about versioning, we talk about versioning all the pieces and parts that go into your release. And this is core to release automation. When you manage all of the pieces, including the database, then you can do proper roll forwards and roll back. So for example, you can certainly you can always roll forward in a binary, but you can't always roll forward on a database update. So a database is sort of unique in its requirements for deployments, because if version 2 added some core lookup data or a column, and you want to get production all the way up to version 5, you have to re-release version 3 and 4. If you have a release automation solution that's truly handling these problems for you, it will understand the iterative differences between version 2 and version 5, even at the database level. It's sort of the same for your environment variable settings. In particular, the Kubernetes and microservices, every single microservice will have a whole suite of specifications, and you can change one of those specifications and it interacts with, or it may disrupt the way it interacts with the Kubernetes cluster. So those specifications become part of your code. So having the ability to version those pieces in a way that looks like code, in the same way as you do a version control on a piece of code, is critical. But you need to start breaking it out into its individual pieces. And then, of course, you need to be able to do the deployment. And, I kind of feel like this screen is like that UPS commercial where there's guys talking and the seasons are going by and he's talking about everything that he's doing. And then the guy says, and do you ship? Well, yeah, and then you ship. The deployment piece for most ARA solutions is the easy part. And if you're buying an ARA tool just to improve your deployments, you're missing the point. But any good ARA tool that you look at, you're going to want to find one that can help support physical servers, cloud environments, or Kubernetes clusters, and be able to track the inventory on all of that. Because that's what these pieces that I'm showing up here is what the production side of the house needs. So development teams need to have a better conversation with the production side of the house and understand what they need to see in order to allow deployments to occur on a high frequency basis. If you're not having that conversation, they're going to continue wanting to control the process because they're not being invited to the party.
Exactly.
And they do own production. They get to make those decisions. But there's no reason why your process from dev to test, and it cannot be repeated in production. Next screen, please. So again, this idea of a domain-driven design, and let's talk about it from a monolithic. If you had a domain-driven design and you were to break down your application, it would look pretty much like a pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid, you would have the infrastructure domain, the version of Oracle you need, the version of the operating system you need, the version of third-party pieces that everybody is sharing, the version of the Java runtime. In the middle of that, you would have a domain that looks more like the database, because the application is still dependent upon the version of the database. And DBAs would have the ability to publish SQL scripts that are associated to your application and to a particular version of your application. So they're being brought into that conversation as well. So, and then at the top of your pyramid would be your application, your binaries, your jar file. And somewhere in there, probably around in the middle between the database and between the infrastructure, might be your environment variables that you need to define how the server or the image or the cluster is going to react with your application binary. That's what a domain-driven design brings to you. And we talked a lot about domain-driven design in object-oriented programming. Well, we're back here. We're back here because microservices are going to require that. And I would encourage you to Google the domain-driven design of microservices, and you'll be surprised how much is written about it and how critical it is in order to have a successful implementation of this service-based architecture. The centralized publishing allows everybody to see what's reusable. Without that, it's like having a music sharing service without a way to track it by artist or by album or by genre. It would be really hard to find your music unless you knew exactly the name of the song and maybe the album and the artist that it came from. So when we're moving to this new modern architecture where things are moving faster, collaboration becomes more critical, and you have to have a tool or you have to have a process that includes collaboration between production and development without having to pick up the phone. It has to be a one-stop place for all of that information, or what I like to call a single source of truth that anybody can go look at. And then the component to application mapping with the configuration versioning. That becomes important for production teams because they don't have all the knowledge that a development team has about how an application is assembled and what the parts are, which is part of the reason why if you don't have a blueprint that you can share between dev, test, and prod, production teams want to do stuff on their own because they want to know it's right. And they're the ones that are responsible for keeping production healthy. Now, we do see a lot where production teams will reach out to the development teams and they work together to get a release done. But we have to, that needs to stop. This stuff it's 2019. We can automate this in a way that it's safe and fast and can be exposed so that everybody knows what's happening. And safe and fast is the key because you're about to embark on an experience if you're moving into Kubernetes where you're going to start doing a large number of rapid small releases, and you need to be able to do that safely. So we've come to a point in our growth in terms of software where we really have to begin moving away from processes that are obfuscated in scripts, and we have to move towards processes that are exposed and everybody can collaborate, and there's a kind of a one-stop shop that you can see what's happening. This is the only way we're going to break down the water scrum fall approach. And that approach will not work with microservices. Next screen, please. So I use this as an example of what's coming in terms of microservices, but I could also talk about this in terms of a monolithic application, but I'm going to talk about it in terms of a microservice application. So I have a biking game, and the user can choose which bike they'd like. We have one version of the bike, which is called the Bumblebee, and a second version of the bike, which is called the Yellow Jacket. Now, the difference between the two is the Yellow Jacket has a black frame and a black seat, and you can see that in the picture. When we talk about microservices, we talk about the availability of having both of these versions running in your environment at the same time. So you have shared microservices, which in our case is the login master and the front end master. And then we have a domain that is the core of the bike, the wheels and the frame and the seat. That core of the bike only needs to change when somebody wants to change a piece of it. So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about a Lego set, where you're not going to just build it and set it up on a shelf. You're building a transformer. So that if you want to send out a version 2 and you want to route it to a group of people to test it, you can do that. And in the end, when we have matured these modern architectures and we have built the tools in a way that they are really serving this modern architecture, we'll only do the deployment once. And that will be huge because we'll deploy out to that microservice, that Kubernetes cluster. We'll route who we want to use that new version of a single component. And that may be a group of developers. When we're ready, we'll reroute it to testers. And when we're ready, we'll reroute it to production. Now, there may be changes on the way. You may have to create that version may have to have the name of the database associated to it inside that particular container, but that's very doable. So what we have is the potential ability to create an environment where we're not doing dev, test, and prod deployments any longer. We're managing configurations and users, which means that some of the problems that we've currently face now with doing deployments in different environments and those different environment configurations cause us problems down the road, we'll actually be able to test in production, which is what I have heard developers tell me probably for the last 20 years. Next screen, please.
Mm-hmm.
So when we build out these two pieces together, what we end up with is this continuous process improvement in Insight. You're able to see from the very beginning when a JIRA ticket was created, when the source code was updated, how quickly or how slow it was to get it from that fix to a tester, and how quickly or how slow it was to take the movement from test to production, which right now is, as Jeff pointed out, is most of the problem. You'll have a place where you have a central point of control for your software releases. And when I say releases, I'm not talking about the deployment as a release. I'm talking about the process.
Mm-hmm.
So version 2 is a release. What are the pieces and parts, and how long did it take to go from cradle to grave? And then you solve the audit tracking and the inventory history for production teams and those who want governance. Developers shouldn't have to worry about governance. The process should take care of it for you. And developers shouldn't have to have a conversation with production teams about where the deployment went. You should just be able to look at an inventory report and see that. So what we're building out is, some controls and checkpoints from the point in time that you check out to the endpoint update. And ultimately, that is what I like to call continuous delivery. Even though the development, or even though the analysts may have created some new terms like application release orchestration and application release automation, which I tend to think just makes things more confusing. What we're trying to do is break down the water scrum fall approach. We're providing these tools together, provide you a way to track the initial change request and the release all the way to its production endpoints. And the goal is to do that in folded time. We have to do it as quickly as possible. We don't have the luxury of 3 months and to do a release once a quarter. They're being done once a day. And if you're doing monolithic releases once a day, you're on the way to being able to do microservice releases. So achieve the first, and the second will be easy.
Yep, we're all here to go faster. It's kind of funny to think of all the automation and gains that have been made, only to get stuck in some kind of manual, lengthy process without any visibility to it.
Well, we have to really approach the release process in a true agile practice, whereby dev and prod are all sitting in the same room. We see that sometimes in site reliability engineers, we are beginning to shift left. But with things moving as quickly as possible, there needs to be better insight, and everybody on the team should be cross-trained. And that's a kind of a typical agile practice, is everybody should know what's happening. That's why you're all in the same room. So these tools are putting everybody in the same room, even if we're not.
Well, I think it's kind of funny. So isn't all this just continuous delivery?
Yeah, so there's a new continuous delivery foundation out there, and they put in a definition of what continuous delivery is. And I would say yes, it is, because they claim that continuous delivery is software engineering approach in which teams produce software in short cycles, ensuring that the software can be reliably released at any time. This does not talk about how to track a change request. It does not talk about how to execute your testing. It does not talk about how to manage your deployments. It's a goal. It's sort of like the Green New Deal. It's a goal. And the tools that you use will determine how well you achieve the goal. Now, initially, continuous delivery is often associated with tools like Jenkins, and Jenkins orchestrates scripts underneath it. Over time, Jenkins was beginning to have more and more plugins to do the automation, but there's still pieces and parts to the whole Jenkins story that is missed, and much of it is in insight and reporting. So we got really good at doing CI with Jenkins, which was what it was intended to do. But when it comes to pushing workflows from dev, test to prod, there's pieces that it lacks, and Blue Ocean fixed some of that. But I believe as we move down this road, we're going to find that more and more functionality is going to be pushed up to that orchestration level. And that's what the analysts are seeing as release orchestration instead of continuous delivery. So I say it's the beginning. You can't think of a Jenkins as a continuous delivery tool. It really is a continuous integration tool that has been used in those creative ways. And it serves quite a bit. It just doesn't get you all the way there. It doesn't allow you to break down that last wall.
Mm-hmm.
Next screen, please.
Well, just to kind of dive into a couple pieces, that's why we're here. Plutora, we come at this business because we're a value stream management platform. We integrate into the tools chain wherever and whatever your process is to help you along your journey of improving application delivery. If you're just starting, come talk to us. If you have heavy governance and audit requirements, come talk to us if you really need it. If you're all the way automated and you're pretty far down the path and you're pretty agile, then you're probably wrestling with visibility and some of the metrics. Come talk to us. There's a lot of things here that we help do, and there's no reason to struggle. We're one of the leaders in the value stream management wave with Forrester, and certainly worthwhile simply because we've got experience in doing this and have done this for many, many customers. The point is you don't have to struggle. You don't have to just wherever you are, if you're on the engineering side of just trying to, how do I figure this out as part of my CI tool? If you're on the management side of how do I get the right things happening and how do I get visibility in the black box of what's going on there? How do I identify the bottlenecks and improve them? We have solutions for that. You don't have to struggle anymore. It's a pretty straightforward cloud-based tool. Hooks into your tool chain, pulls the data in, and gives you the insights you need. It's that simple. And then you get the orchestration layer on top that will integrate to the rest of the tools. We've got a lot of proven cases on how we've done this across company after company. And really, I love this quote that, Plutora is the glue that holds the delivery process together. We pull these people together in your process of making product-oriented teams. We help get the people in the same room. That's the point.
And then there's DeployHub. So DeployHub is, I would call it a more, it was born with the cloud in mind. It was born with the idea of microservices in mind and the ability to not just ship, but also do the versioning, the collaboration with the cataloging and the packaging, because that's where it becomes critical. You need to be able to understand in the microservices world in particular, if you've updated a microservice and it's shared across multiple applications, who's using it? Who's consuming it? Who needs to be notified that a new version of that microservice is now available? And it may fix a very critical piece. That's what DeployHub does. It does microservice mapping and sharing. It can be used for both a more of a legacy look, as I discussed, because your components still can be defined as database components and binaries and infrastructure, and it manages everything from the infrastructure to the databases to the binary. And it manages that in a microservice environment where your binary has been decomposed into multiple microservices. It's based on the Ortelius project, which is an open source project, and it's part of the CD Foundation. Next screen. And ultimately, it is deployments that people are looking for to improve, to have the visibility where the production teams feel confident that they can re-execute the deployment that the development teams have been executing all along, and being able to fold time. So if you're doing these monolithic deployments, your deployments can be pretty slow. In this case, it was a 7-hour deployment that doing it in an incremental fashion, it got it down to just a quick 5 minutes. Next screen, please.
Yeah, you don't have to struggle in this world. It's there's tools out there. Stop writing scripts. I think that's the point, is stop writing scripts to do this stuff. You don't have to do it that way anymore. That's the old world, and it's not going to scale. If you find yourself in the world of writing scripts to try to, automate and get approvals, oh man, come talk to us.
And on the deployment side, the problem with the deployment side, there is cultural problems with the deployment side, even in the way these tools are sold. So if you look at some of the DeployHub competitors, in your project team, you really have to go back to the CIO office to get budget approval to purchase something like this. This is kind of this is my soapbox, because it's annoyed me for quite some time. We've had these really awesome, open source tools that people can do things fairly complete, but deployment's never really been one of them, and it's really expensive. So when we built out DeployHub, we decided to offer a team version, which is a compiled version of Ortelius, and we host it out on our Google Compute environment. So you can start using DeployHub today and start breaking down that water scrum fall wall sooner than later. Mm-hmm. Now, it may be the case that production teams say, oh, we want more security around it. Well, that's fine. We charge $200 per month per application. We don't charge per endpoint. In microservices, that just hurts. I guess we could charge per cluster or per node in the microservices world. But even if you have you're a small team, but you have a really big application that's going out to 5,000 servers, you don't want to pay for an endpoint for every server. So we saw that in order to help break down this wall, we had to break down some of the cultural or disrupt some of the cultural aspects about it. And we're the only ARA solution that's offered as an open source solution and has a team version that you can use at no cost that's hosted. So you get cool. There. You can do it. You don't have to write scripts. There are cheaper, better ways to do it.
Exactly.
All right, you guys ready to do some questions?
Yes.
All right. We have a bunch of them so far, but there's time. If you guys have a question for either one of our panelists, please go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question. The first question, I am on a shared services team. Do the same ideas, tools, or processes apply? It seems like a different beast.
Well, I think we got both stuff to talk about there. It's shared services. Yeah. Go ahead, Tracy, and I'll take the next whack.
Absolutely, 100%. Just because it is a smaller service, it doesn't mean it doesn't have a life cycle. So 100%, yes, it should have the same. It should go through a same process. It needs actually, in that case, it needs more visibility than less.
That was exactly what I was going to say. You know, we've got a number of places around environments and releases, and the whole problem is when you get into a bigger organization, you have shared services teams that are trying to interact and help provide value to individual dev teams. How are you going to do that without the visibility? And the point is that's where we come in, frankly. You can templatize the release process, you can templatize the management of an orchestration of environments, and then give access to people so they can see exactly what's going on in any delivery or in any environment. Regardless of whomever or wherever things are actually happening. Individual teams can check in their stuff and incorporate it into the into the orchestration engine, if you will, with giving visibility to whoever needs it. We have something that we've built into Plutora called a racing matrix. You know, it's a responsible, basically a list of stakeholders from approvers and informed and so forth. And anyone can get any level of access to any particular pipeline or any particular environment to see exactly what's going on. But especially if you're a shared services team, you should be looking at value stream management tools.
Excellent. Okay. Next question. Is ARA independent of the release packaging?
Well, I'll give you my developer answer because I think it's the fair thing to. I can't give you any other answer. So release packaging can be done in many different ways. You could write a script. You can write a YAML script, and that can be your release package. So bundling up the applications and what the application looks like has been done, and everybody's doing it today. Otherwise, you would never be able to get a release out. You're doing it in some kind of a script, a Maven script or something. That is basically release packaging. What ARA tools have done is expose that, because part of the cultural problem is a developer might write the script, but production doesn't necessarily trust what's in it. So they want to write their own, so they do their own version of that script, their own version of that release packaging, because maybe the script that developers use, they're not using the same version of Oracle, which again can cause problems, but that's the reality of it. So release packaging is being done today. It's just how it's being done, and ARA disrupts how that's being done. So The strong ARA tools do more than just take a zip file and then track the process of the life of that zip file. The stronger ARA tools are starting to understand that the packaging is part of the problem that needs to be solved and needs to be transparent. And as we get into microservices, we are starting to have more pieces and parts, so more moving little parts in our Lego set that moves on a regular basis. So it's not necessarily going to be easy to track those changes that quickly in a script. Now you could say I can take my script and I can check it into Git and I can do a diff. Yeah, you can. You really can. But that's you doing it on your script that you already know what's happening in it. And production is going to say, well, I want my own version of it. So it has to do with control and kind of releasing that control so that the application packaging is visualized. So everybody understands it, not just the people who wrote the script and can do a diff to figure out what they did different the last time. I hope that answers the question, but I don't want to discount anybody who's writing those intense scripts because I did it for so many years. That is packaging.
Yep.
All right, great. Next question, and I'm sure this one will incite spirited conversation. Have any clients successfully gotten legal to join continuous delivery? Approved wording on the user experience always seems so slow.
Oh, I can talk about it from my end. The whole point is these processes are hard. And it's not about getting them, it's about getting them what they need and the time in which everyone needs it. If you wait until the end and then hand the whole thing over to legal, you've already lost. The point is to bring them into the process more. Where we started this discussion is that you've got a true self-contained product team, and legal and some of the requirements there need to be part of that. Typically, the product owners have been the one trying to coordinate the activity so that in the design you can actually hand it in. The point with the release orchestration is as you scope this out, there'll be designs. There can be what we've seen some organizations do is they actually create some non-functional requirements that are now managed by the product owners, and in so doing, those non-functional requirements is, hey, here's a screenshot, or a mock-up of a particular screen. Make sure that that is gets approval early in the process while it's still being built. It doesn't slow down the building process because you can build out screens and just replace the the actual text for each of the wording, and so it's considered a bug as it flows through the process. And yes, we've seen that. And yes, by incorporating it up front, you've now eliminated that as a step because the code can still get built in the process.
Excellent.
Go ahead. Yeah, I would like to just comment. I mean, where in terms of governance and auditing and legal, they have to start understanding that this is a transforming environment, and that is now what we have. I look back and I saw some of the news on Boeing and how they had this one particular feature in that was supposed to have been a free feature, but they didn't have it as a free feature. Instead, it was a paid-for feature. And Ethiopian Airlines decided not to buy that, and now we have hundreds of people died from it. I'm sitting there hearing the news, and I'm thinking, are you kidding me? You mean they couldn't re-release something that changed that feature to a free feature as soon as they realized they had made the mistake, which was a year ago? Is that how precious their Dragon was? They didn't want the kid picking it up and playing with it and fixing something? So legal and governance has to understand that we are now in environments that can change. You don't have to be panicked because you're going to shift something from one feature to another. It's sad that happened. It's horrible that happened, and we can't allow that to continue to happen. But that is a perfect example of software that was not allowed to be adjusted because they thought, well, we can get away with not having to. We'd rather not touch the Dragon on the shelf.
Mm.
And now legal has to begin understanding that, yes, we are in a transforming environment now, not one that just sits there on the shelf. And that's the way we're going to be able to move everything that we're doing forward. And developers are going to be able to release new innovation to those end users quicker and fix things when it's life-threatening.
All right. Great. We are about 6 minutes to the top of the hour. I think we can get in at least one more question here. So next question, why would I need DeployHub if I have a CD pipeline from Visual Studio Team Services? I think it is, VSTS.
Well, if you're using VSTS to manage your deployment, I don't know enough about that tool to tell you if it's managing the environment variables, if it's managing the infrastructure layer, and if it's managing the database layer. Most of what I understand with VSTS is it's managing your binaries, and shipping is pretty easy, absolutely, 100%. As you start decomposing your microservice or your Visual Studio environments and you start moving into microservices, it's a whole different story because you want to start sharing the reusable code in better ways. This was, been sort of a pain point for the Visual Studio platform in general, is that even when you're building applications, your projects you can't even share projects that easy. Everything has to be in one big project, and you compile everything in a very monolithic way. So yes, while VSTS can do shipping, it doesn't do all the other things that guy sits there in that commercial and talks about through the 4 seasons. And sharing and cataloging is pretty critical, and being able to visualize how the application is packaged is critical.
Yep.
And it's just going to need to, the VSTS will probably either adjust, or you'll begin using it just to manage a single component, a single small component. So eventually you will be saying, I need to do more.
All right, great. I think we have time for one more question if we do the answer pretty quickly here. What is a common methodology or tool to automatically track version numbers for artifacts and releases?
Wait, can you say that? Can you read that again?
Sure. What is a common methodology or tool to automatically track version numbers for artifacts and releases?
So DeployHub does that. It's part of it, and the free version does that. DeployHub team does that for you. So basically, what it does is it creates just literally and I believe you can give it a label so you can define how you want your version numbers to look. But every time you update a version, and you can set it up where it knows if a version of a component has been rebuilt in a build. So you have a new build that created a new version of a component. It will increment that number. And you can define how you want those numbers to look when they're incremented, if you have a particular format that you want to use. Once that application, if you update a component version, it automatically create a new application version. So initially you have the application base version, and you have a base version. So you have a base application and a base version the first time, and the rest are new increments of that. So I would call them variances. So every time you make a change to a component, it creates a new variance, which it gets a new version number. And that, in essence, creates a new application. And you could go at another level higher if you wanted to. You could have different versions of a release, which is multiple applications running together, which includes multiple components. So that's the format that DeployHub uses. It starts at the lowest level at the component level. It versions the component, which initiates a new version of an application. And if you're running more than one application, then you have a new version of a release.
Excellent. Okay. All right, great. So we're about 2 minutes to the top of the hour, so I'm going to have to close out the question and answer period. Thank you to everybody who did submit a question. If we didn't get to your question, I apologize, but please know that both Tracy and Jeff will be getting a copy of the questions, and I'm sure either they or somebody from their organization will be more than happy to follow up with you offline. And before we close things out, I did say at the top of the hour we'd be doing a drawing for 3 $50 Amazon gift cards, so let's go ahead and do that now. Our first winner of today's gift card drawing is James Allen. Congratulations, James. Second winner today is Thomas Stouffer. Congratulations, Thomas. And our final winner today is Daniel Gray Brewer. Congratulations to you, Daniel. And before we close things out, want to remind the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the event, or if you just want to listen to it again, you will have the opportunity to do so We'll be sending you an email a little bit later on today that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. The webinar is also going to be living on the DevOps.com website, so you can always find it there. Just go to www.devops.com/webinars. Look in the on-demand section. It should be right there waiting for you. Tracy Ragan, Jeff Keyes, thank you so much for such a great presentation. As always, I got a lot out of it, so thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Great. I want to thank the audience also for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody.